Welcome to Poli-Psych podcast. We today are offering an introduction to our channel and what we hope to do, the understanding that we hope to bring. Poli-Psych is a reference to politics combined with psychology. And our approach as far as psychology is to use the MBTI and the Enneagram to help bring more understanding to politics via analyzing different public figures. And with us are Ken, who is our MBTI expert. And Ken, can you please introduce yourself a bit?
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. My name is Ken, and I've been studying Carl Jung since about the age of 20. I have a double major in psychology and economics. MBTI stands for Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's a property of CPP, yet it's very widely used both in business and in consultative psychology. It's an assessment tool primarily. It's very quantitative, meaning there's plenty of data out there. It's been in use for decades, and historically we've got population distribution studies and things of that nature. So it does involve a little bit of study. If you're not familiar, we will be supplying a show that probably is already on our channel for orientation to the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and we encourage you to check it out.
Thank you, Ken, and so glad you're with us today. And we also have Don, who is an Enneagram expert. And Don, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Cindy. I shy away from the word expert because I'm not certified as an Enneagram trainer or teacher as of yet, although I have been through certification courses and have been studying the Enneagram for, I guess 20 years or so now. And my interest in politics goes back, of course, even before that. And there is definitely an interesting way of tying the two together. And I don't think that's been done too much in the Enneagram literature that I'm aware of. So I'm excited to get into the material with everyone and discuss these things. Generally speaking, in the Enneagram, well, first of all, about myself, want to mention that I have, slightly differently from Ken, I have a hard sciences background. And that means, my teaching is in science, an advanced degree in plant studies, botany type stuff, and agronomy, that kind of thing. So sciences. But the Enneagram, as Ken just stated, he didn't state about the Enneagram, but it's the opposite of the MBTI. The MBTI being very explicit, very hard and fast numbers wise. You can do studies, you can measure, you can do hard metrics is the word I was looking for. With the Enneagram, it's more intuitive and it's more internal. The only expert that can decide what your Enneagram type is you. There aren't really any tests per se that you can take. Now there's some paragraphs that you can read and some self-descriptions that you can say, well, this is me and this isn't. Those are very helpful. But the Enneagram, unlike the MBTI, is kind of internal referencing. So there's that difference there. I found my journey of self-discovery with the Enneagram to be quite enlightening, and it's given me quite a very useful framework in dealing with my personal life as well as with the outside world with politics. Now, as far as the Enneagram goes, I'm a type 5, and my subtype is social. So for those that already know the Enneagram, that'll help you understand me a little bit better, and I'll be explaining a little bit more about those terms as we get into more detail.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to mention that both Don and Ken are INTJ, and Ken is probably an Enneagram 9. So just if that helps bring any understanding to anyone. And so moving on, as I stated earlier, we want to introduce the concept of analyzing politics and political and public figures using these two tools of the MBTI and the Enneagram. So first of all, can you help us out, give us some understanding of how the MBTI can help people understand more what's going on in politics, and perhaps even be able to make some better decisions and form some more substantive opinions?
Sure. The MBTI points to what we would call right-handed functions in the old paradigm of preference for either right-handed or left-handed functioning. And again, it's been measured on the national scale, and this began to occur to me and other people during the great conflict of 2015, 2016. Media controls almost all of our input. We can rarely see or meet a candidate for office. Most of our news is coming to us secondhand through video. And the stunning fact with all of this is that that conduit is very heavily controlled by a very small number of power player corporations. And although the internet has democratized the flow of information, we still do face issues of selective patterning and even outright banning or censorship. The MBTI population distribution illustrates an important point that we will probably come back to later, especially pertaining to gender. If we focus our attention on the right-hand column, you'll see the personality type distribution for females, and directing your attention to the third letter, the F, which will be familiar to most of you if you're familiar with the MBTI. You'll see the F position in the top, I think it's the top 5 female expressions of MBTI. That accounts for 66% of the population. So the dichotomy of feeling versus thinking is a very prevalent factor. And it is prevalent if you look at the polemic that's used to either attract the female vote or the polemic that might repel the female vote. And it has nothing to do with gender as much as just the orientation, how it's been selectively encouraged in our culture probably through child rearing and other factors that are sort of beyond the scope. On the other hand, the left-hand column, you see thinking predominating in the male population. The top 3 profiles accommodate or account for about 36% of the population sampled in this study. And that also plays out in other areas besides politics. You can see it in marriage counseling, and the analysis of arguments can usually fall very clearly between polemic or comments that fall within a statement relating to thinking, meaning the logical, objective thinking, versus the logic of values, which is the redefinition of feeling in MBTI. It was definitely not intended to mean the same as emotions as much as a rationale for making a decision based on your internal or external values. And beyond this, we also have the compatibility chart, which shows how in active interaction, compatibility is not always guaranteed between certain types. This particular chart is one that's used in pair bonding, couples compatibility, but it also applies anywhere. I would say it would apply to how you would react to a news presenter, how you would react to a presidential candidate. Just for example, a very brief example, our president, Donald Trump, tests or has been objectively observed to be testing probably as an ESTP. And we can see lots of red. Red is the think this one through. The compatibility problem seems to again be the FJ or feeling in the third category, which plays out again and correlates with the population distribution. And that'll kind of be one of the main themes of the show, is trying to bring that theoretical construct into play in understanding conflict in our political system, and also in understanding what effective communication would do to bridge those gaps.
If I may ask a little question about that, just to clarify, so you're stating that the president is probably an ESTP, and the huge majority of women in the country are feeling types, and virtually all of these feeling types would not be compatible with the president's MBTI type. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, but I would also add that none of the people, almost nobody, including ourselves, have ever met the president directly. So 100% of the sensory data about this individual come through television or other forms of media. And this is really probably the heart of it. It's not as much the character of Donald Trump, because I bet if you had most people sitting down with him one-on-one, they would come away with a very different opinion of him as a human being. But right now, that image is selectively patterned through these intermediaries, and they know very well this. I can speak definitely from the MBTI side. This is definitely in use in the influencing industry, advertising right through intelligence, to influence foreign elections or whatever. It's a very well-traveled road. And so that would be my point. I do agree with what you're saying, but again, it points out the significance of that media choke point.
That is all very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing some of those insights. And we look forward, as we produce more videos, to learning a lot more about that. So, Don, having heard Ken speak about how MBTI relates to politics, can you offer some insight as to how the Enneagram might help people understand what's happening in our world and in current events a little better?
Sure. So thanks, Cindy. It is quite a different system, and I'll contrast some of what Ken said with the way that things work in the Enneagram, because it's quite different than the MBTI. What you'll notice between the different types that we're dealing with here is there's 3 centers, and you can leave that chart up that shows the triangles. And I want to say a little bit about each of those centers. Now, you're, again, within both of these worlds, within the MBTI and within the Enneagram, you have some jargon that we're going to repeatedly cover. And one of the things I'd like to say is that just like the MBTI, which kind of redefines what we mean by feelings and thinking, so in the Enneagram, and there is a sexual distribution that I'll also mention here briefly, that corresponds to some of the male and females more standard issues, like more men are thinkers, more women are feelers. That kind of thing is there, but it kind of it's not quite as emphasized or important in the system as is just the general feel of the energy. And again, this Enneagram tends to be kind of fuzzy, but this is, once you've hung around people that know their Enneagram type and you are aware of the system dynamics, you begin to pick up things. Now, people operating out of in the Enneagram chart there at the top of the triangle is the 9, and that's the top of the will center, or the gut center, as it's sometimes referred to. And some of these terms are interchangeable. And so you have 3 of the types that are gut oriented, and they tend to be neither thinkers nor feelers. So we have a immediate difference from the MBTI, that you've got triads instead of dual polarities. As you've got within the MBTI, you've got 16 types, because you've got 4 categories, and you've got 2 of each of those, which works out to 16 types. And the distributions in the MBTI, as Ken was saying, are very interesting. They're not equal. And in the Enneagram, we don't really know for sure what the population distribution is, because the Enneagram is self-referencing, and we can't know people's Enneagrams type unless they do some internal self-discovery and say, yes, I'm a this or I'm a that. But there do seem to, just anecdotally, there probably are about twice as many nines. So nines tend to be kind of mediators that kind of make the kind of glue that makes everything hold together. So that's the will type. I just want to briefly cover these. In the right side of the chart there, you see the label feelings. Well, that's where the threes are. They're the center of the emotional triad. And then over on the thinking side, where the blue bubble says thought, that's the thinkers, and that's in the position of the 6. So each of those types are the center of each of the 3 centers, which makes for 9 different types of 3 times 3. And then you've got 3 subtypes within each. And the subtypes can be very distinctive. And those 3 subtypes within each are social, as the emphasis of the person's life, or then that's one subtype. Then there's also the self-preservation subtype, and there's also the one-on-one or sexual subtypes. And again, each of those has a different energy or sub-energy that can be very distinctive. One of the things as it relates to politics that we'll notice, and I think will be kind of fun, whenever people learn that either of these systems, and I certainly did this when I learned the MBTI and when I learned the Enneagram, you immediately do your family, the people that you know the best, and then you'll see, well, these people are like this, and I relate to them because I'm a this, and then your world starts to, have some interesting comparisons. And then once you begin to know public figures, like the figures in both the entertainment industry and in politics, you begin to see, well, so-and-so is a 3, and they're kind of like this president that we've got. I wonder if they can give me some insights into, how the president sees the world. That kind of thing can start to happen, and it makes for new possibilities of understanding that didn't exist before. And that's what I'm really looking forward to getting into.
I think that's tremendously valuable. And I'm aware that the title of one of the chief MBTI books is Please Understand Me. And I believe that for all of us in our world, especially at this time, there seems to be so much anger and hostility that is pervasive in the political realm. And I'm hoping, and I believe that both of you are also hoping that in bringing greater understanding of different personality types, we will be able to maybe smooth some of the rough edges for people that have formed around politics in our country. And understanding can only help. So thank you both for your explanations, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. And gentlemen, do you have any parting words?
Well, just briefly, we're all different for a reason, and I think as soon as that's recognized as a strength of the culture, a strength of the human adventure, and most of all, it's an adaptive way of really meeting any challenge. And we can't all do everything. There are certain strengths that uncover other weaknesses, and we can't always decide how we want people to be to suit us. And we just have to learn to understand each other and understand the bigger purpose.
Yeah, I'll chime in there and say I fully agree with that. And one of the things I meant to mention is that each of us three here, with Cindy and Ken and myself, we each come from one of the three different centers. So we've got that going for us here. And we want to begin to build a world in which we value each other's understandings and learn to branch out that way and create a wider view of the world. And we think that'll be helpful. We hope you enjoy it.
So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe so you never miss one of our podcasts and YouTube videos. And please click like. Thanks so much.